欢迎回到 Simba 成长和财商频道。2024年伯克希尔股东大会在刚刚过去的5月4日召开，这是在查理芒格去世之后，巴菲特第一次主持的股东大会。不过在这次大会上，格雷格·阿贝尔坐在了原本查理芒格的座位上。早在2020年的股东大会上，格雷格就已经替代当时不能出席会议的查理芒格坐在了巴菲特的身边。而且在同一天，巴菲特宣布，如果将来自己卸任，将由格雷格接任 CEO。那在这次股东大会上，巴菲特再次谈到了自己的继任者问题，解释了减持苹果股票以及公司持有的现金达到历史高点的原因。巴菲特还回答了投资者的其他问题，包括他是否已经看空股市，还会继续买入股票吗？会买入哪些股票？以及他对生成式人工智能的看法和怎样看待特斯拉的自动驾驶技术对保险业务的影响等等。今天的节目，我为各位观众制作了一个懒人包，来回顾这次股东大会的重点内容，并解读大家最关心的几个问题，请一定要看到节目的最后哦。这次股东大会，巴菲特再次确认格雷格将接任自己成为伯克希尔的 CEO， 并重申公司在格雷格的领导下，伯克希尔所遵循的资本配置原则不会改变，这无疑可以提振场内场外投资者的信心。格雷格1962年出生于加拿大，曾在普华永道工作，后转投能源公司 Cal Energy。在该公司被伯克希尔收购了控股权之后，格雷格加入了伯克希尔，负责管理各类能源业务，并于2018年晋升为非保险业务的副董事长。那在这次大会上提振人心的还有公司的收益，公司第一季度的利润达到了112亿美金，同比增长了39%，这都归功于公司保险业务营收的增长以及更高的投资回报。对于股东们来说，伯克希尔赚了多少钱固然重要，同样重要的还有他创历史纪录的现金规模以及公司的持股变化，特别是对于苹果股票的削减。
Okay, we put out some results for the first quarter this morning at 7 o'clock our time, and some few sharp-eyed analysts and press people already picked up one or two items from it, which I'm sure we'll get some questions on later. But if we could start out with slide number 1, which is that it should be showing now, you'll see that in the first quarter, the way, and we talk about operating earnings at Berkshire, we've explained that many times. That's why we think these figures that we give you are the most descriptive of what's really going on in the business, and take out the wild swings in the market that otherwise just can have us reporting big earnings one quarter and big losses another quarter. We pay no attention to those at Berkshire, but you will see that we had a better than average quarter. And Ajit Jain wants me to point out to everyone that you cannot take the insurance earnings of the first quarter and multiply by 4. It just doesn't work that way in insurance. And while we insure storms around the world, the major storms, for example, that would affect our earnings would be, probably number one, would be something that went along that came in at the wrong place from our standpoint, and then just kept going up the East Coast. And that's our number one risk as we evaluate things. But we're in all kinds of risks. There can be an earthquake tomorrow. There can be an earthquake 10 years from now, and then there can, we're in that sort of business. But the first quarter does hit the. Should be our best quarter. Certainly shouldn't be our worst quarter. The most likely quarter to be the worst quarter is the third quarter. But anything can happen in insurance. But fortunately, nothing much happened in insurance during the first quarter. So we had much improved earnings in insurance underwriting. And then our investment income was almost bound to, well, it was almost certain to increase. And I said that in the annual report because yields are so much higher than they were last year. And we have a lot of fixed short-term investments that are very responsive to the changes in interest rates. So that figure is up substantially, and I can predict that one will be up for the year. We've got more money to invest, as we'll get to in a minute, and that's fairly predictable. So that number will be up. When you get into the railroad earnings, we're down modestly, but we should, not immediately, but we should be earning somewhat more money than we are earning under present traffic conditions, and then traffic conditions can also hit the hit the potential earnings of the railroad. And if you want, every Wednesday, you can get car loadings from the previous week, and I'll regard it goes a little deranged if you do get them, but I get them every week. They're available, and you'll see that car loadings have been running for the industry have been running down modestly, and these earnings were as is expected, but we should earn somewhat more money than that on the equivalent amount of car loadings. And we in the energy company, we had better earnings, but our earnings were distorted. Well, they were affected by conditions that I wrote about in the annual report. not really discuss more this morning. But off a low base of last year, they were up somewhat. And so you get down to the final figure, and $11.2 billion is it's quite an improvement from last year. But we would expect our earnings should go up modestly from year to year because, after all, we're retaining like $37 billion last year of earnings. So if we put $37 billion more, you left it with us. We should do something that's satisfactory. And the goal of Berkshire, economic goal, is to increase the operating earnings and decrease the shares outstanding. It's that simple to describe. It's not quite so simple to pull off necessarily, but that's what we're attempting to do. And if we'll turn to slide 2.
在这里，巴菲特说，公司第一季度的利润优于过去的平均表现，其中保险业务的营收有了明显的提高，能源业务营收也有所提高，尤其是和去年的低基数相比，我们总共获得了超过112亿美金的利润。但是我们希望这个利润能够继续增长。去年的利润总和是370亿，如果今年不能超过去年，那么我们的股东就会离开我们。
So our cash and treasury bills were $182 billion at the quarter end, and I think it's a fair assumption that they will probably be about $200 billion at the end of this quarter. We'd love to spend it, but we won't spend it unless we think we're doing something that has very little risk and can make us a lot of money. And our stock is at a level where it adds slightly to the value when we buy in shares, but we would really buy it in a big way, except you can't buy it in a big way because people don't want to sell it in a big way. But under certain market conditions, we could deploy quite a bit of money in repurchases. And as you'll see on the
截至一季度末，伯克希尔的现金和债券的总规模超过了1820亿美金。巴菲特预计到第二季度末，这个数字有可能超过2000亿。公司持有那么多现金，就是要确保投资的都是低风险高收益的公司，提高运营收入。究竟巴菲特是否看衰股市？我们看他接下来怎么说。
This question is from Johan Halen, who writes, "You're sitting on $168 billion of cash, which you told us today is now more than $182 billion. His questions are, one, what is Buffett waiting for? And two, why not at least deploy some of it?"
Well, I think that's pretty easy to answer. I don't think anybody sitting at this table has any idea of how to use it effectively, and therefore we don't use it, and we don't use it now at 5.4%, but we wouldn't use it if it was at 1%. Don't tell the Federal Reserve that, but prefer it. But we only swing at pitches we like, and if anybody tried to swing at every pitch or felt that because they hadn't swung at a pitch for the last two pitches, they ought to swing at the third one or something like that. There are times, and obviously, but I would say this: I would not like to be running $10 billion now. $10 billion, I think Charlie or I could earn high returns on, because I think there are just a few things that happen on a very, very small scale. But if we had $10 billion, I wouldn't basically see many more opportunities than we found. Now, it's true that something like Japan we could have done if the company had had a 30 or 40 billion, and we'd have had great returns on equity. But if I saw one of those now, I'd do it for Berkshire. It isn't like I'm got a hunger strike or something like that going on. It's just that things aren't attractive, and there's certain ways that can change, and we'll see whether they do.
这个问题同样是关于伯克希尔创历史新高的1820亿现金。巴菲特没有直接回答会把这笔钱投资到哪里，而且现在伯克希尔从短期债券中获得5.4%的收益。巴菲特对此还是比较满意的，他一直秉承要以合理的价格买下一家好公司的投资原则。虽然好公司很多，但是现在的价格都不便宜，因此他现在对股市持观望的态度。我认为这并不能说明他是否是看衰股市。
Let's start. Just given what you mentioned, there was some news that came out in the 10Q this morning. It shows that Berkshire sold another 115 million shares of Apple in this last quarter. That's Berkshire's largest holding. And I think in that vein, we'll start with a question from Sherman Lamb. He is a 27-year-old Berkshire Hathaway Class B shareholder from Malaysia. And he asks, last year you mentioned Coca-Cola and American Express being Berkshire's two long-duration partial ownership positions. And you spent some time talking about the virtues of both these wonderful businesses in your recent shareholder letter. I noticed that you have excluded Apple from this group of businesses. Have you or your investment managers' views of the economics of Apple's business or its attractiveness as an investment changed since Berkshire first invested in 2016?
No, I would. We have sold shares, and I would say that at the end of the year, I would think it extremely likely that Apple is the largest common stock holding we have now. one interesting thing is that Charlie and I looked at common stocks or marketable equities, or the things that people love to look at, as being businesses. And so when we own a Dairy Queen, or we own whatever it may be, we look at that as a business. And when we own Coca-Cola or American Express or Apple, we look at that as a business. Now, we can buy really wonderful companies in the market as businesses. We can't buy all of them. I mean, all of their shares. We can't buy 90% or 80% or anything like that. But when we look at Coca-Cola and American Express and Apple, we look at them as businesses. Now, there's differences in tax factors. There's differences in managerial responsibility, a whole bunch of things. But in terms of deploying your money, we always look at every stock as a business. And we have no attempt made to predict markets. We have no attempt made to pick stocks. I went through many, many years doing the wrong thing. I got interested in stocks very early, and I was fascinated by them. And I wasn't wasting my time because I was reading every book possible and everything else. But finally, I picked up a copy of The Intelligent Investor in Lincoln, and there was a few sentences in there that said, much more eloquently than I can say it, but if you look at stocks as a business and treat the market as something that doesn't tell you, isn't there to instruct you, but it's there to serve you, you'll do a lot better over time than if you try to take charts and listen to people talk about moving averages and look at the Fed pronouncements and all of that sort of thing. And so that made a lot of sense to me then. And the way I've been allowed to deploy it, Charlie and I talked about this, of course, constantly, it's changed over the years as the amount of capital we have and has changed and all of that. But the basic principle was laid out by Ben Graham in that book, which I picked up for a couple of dollars, and which basically said to me, you've been wasting your time now, but maybe you can use what you've learned or been reading about and put it to better use. And then Charlie came along and told me how to put it to even better use. And that's sort of the story of why we own American Express, which is a wonderful business. We own Coca-Cola, which is a wonderful business. And we own Apple, which is an even better business. And we will own, unless something really extraordinary happens, we will own Apple and American Express and Coca-Cola when Greg takes over this place. And it's such a simple approach that it's almost deceptive. Most things, if you keep working harder and harder at it, you learn a little more math or you learn a little more physics. But investments, you don't really have to do that. You really have to have your mind set properly. So we will end up, unless something dramatically happens that really changes capital allocation, a strategy. We will have Apple as our largest investment, but I don't mind at all, under current conditions, building the cash position. I think when I look at the alternative of what's available in the equity markets, and I look at the composition of what's going on in the world, we find it quite attractive. And one thing that may surprise you, but almost everybody I know pays a lot more attention to not paying taxes than I think they should. We don't mind paying taxes at Berkshire, and we are paying a 21% federal rate on the gains we're taking in Apple, and that rate was 35% not that long ago, and it's been 52% in the past when I've been operating. And the federal government owns a part of the earnings of the business we make. They don't own the assets, but they own a percentage of the earnings, and they can change that percentage any year. And the percentage that they've decreed currently is 21%. And I would say with the present fiscal policies, I think that something has to give, and I think that higher taxes are quite likely, and the government wants to take a greater share of your income or mine or Berkshire's. They can do it, and they may decide that someday they don't want the fiscal deficit to be this large because that has some important consequences, and they may not want to decrease spending a lot, and they may decide they'll take a larger percentage of what we earn, and we'll pay it. And we always hope at Berkshire to pay substantial federal income taxes. We think it's appropriate that a country that's been as generous to our owners. It's been the place. I was lucky. Berkshire was lucky it was here, and if we send in a check like we did last year, we sent in over $5 billion to the U.S. federal government. And if 800 other companies had done the same thing, no other person in the United States would have had to pay a dime of federal taxes, other income taxes. No Social Security taxes, no estate taxes, no. It's open down the line. Now, I would like to. I hope things develop well enough with Berkshire that we say we're in the 800 club and maybe even move up a few notches. It doesn't bother me in the least to write that check, and I would really hope with all that America's done for all of you, it shouldn't bother you that we do it. And if I'm doing it at 21% this year and we're doing it at a higher percentage later on, I don't think you'll actually mind the fact that we sold a little Apple this year. Okay.
巴菲特回应了一季度减持 1.15 亿苹果股票是出于税收的原因，这次减持不会影响到他对苹果是一家优质公司的长期判断。巴菲特说，可口可乐和美国运通都是非常优秀的公司，而苹果比前两者更为优秀。苹果自从2016年以来就一直是伯克希尔的第一大持仓，除非有导致资产配置变化的戏剧性事件发生，未来苹果依旧会是伯克希尔的第一大持仓。伯克希尔买入股票就是投资这家公司，而不是基于对市场变化的预测而进行的交易。巴菲特再次强调，格雷格接手 CEO 一职之后，伯克希尔的投资组合中还是会有苹果、可口可乐和美国运通。
I'm Joe, visiting from San Francisco. How do you think about the role of technological advances, especially generative AI, on more traditional industries? Thank you.
Yeah, I made a mistake in calling on 4, but I'll get back to 2 later on. I don't know anything about AI, but I do have. That doesn't mean I deny its existence or importance or anything of the sort. And last year I said, that we let a genie out of the bottle when we developed nuclear weapons, and that genie has been doing some terrible things lately. And the power of that genie scares the hell out of me. And under that, I don't know any way to get the genie back in the bottle. And AI is somewhat similar. It's part way out of the bottle, and it's enormously important, and it's going to be done by somebody. So we may wish we'd never seen that genie, or it may do wonderful things. And I'm certainly not the person that can evaluate that. And I probably wouldn't have been the person that could have evaluated during World War II whether we tested a 20,000-ton bomb that we felt was absolutely necessary for the United States and would actually save lives in the long run, but where we also had Edmund Teller, I think it was on a parallel with Einstein in terms of saying you may, with this test, ignite the atmosphere in such a way that civilization doesn't continue. And we decided to let the genie out of the bottle, and it accomplished the immediate objective of whether it's going to change the future of society. We will find out later. Now, AI, I had one experience that does make me a little nervous, and I'll just explain it. That very, very recently, fairly recently, I saw an image in front of my eyes on the screen, and it was me, and it was my voice, and wearing the kind of clothes I wear, and my wife or my daughter wouldn't have been able to detect any difference, and it was delivering a message that no way came from me. So when you think of the potential for scamming people, if you can reproduce images that I can't even tell that say I need money, it's your daughter. I've just had a car crash. I need $50,000 wired. I mean, scamming has always been part of the American scene, but this would make me, if I was interested in investing in scamming, it's going to be the growth industry of all time, and it's enabled in a way. Now, maybe obviously AI has potential for good things too, but I don't know how you, based on the one I saw recently. I practically would send money to myself over in some crazy country. So I don't have any advice on how the world handles it, because I don't think we know how to handle what we did with the nuclear genie. But I do think, as someone who doesn't understand a damn thing about it, that it has enormous potential for good and enormous potential for harm. And I just don't know how that plays out. I'd like to mention to Becky that Ajit will not be participating in the afternoon session. So if you could focus on if there are insurance questions you want to ask, that'd be a good one.
当被问及生成式人工智能在传统行业中饰演的角色时，巴菲特首先非常谦虚地说自己对人工智能一无所知，但是人工智能引发的欺诈很有可能成为下一个高速成长的市场。巴菲特把人工智能和核武器的威胁做了比较，他说，人类发明核武器时，就好像把精灵从瓶子里释放出来，但是这个精灵有着毁天灭地的力量，而我们又不知道怎样把它收回瓶子里。人工智能也与之类似。这次股东大会持续了一整天，除了 lunch break 从早晨到下午，巴菲特不间断地 地回答股东们的提问，一直都是精神奕奕的。作为一名年近94岁高龄的老人是非常不容易的，也是非常让人敬佩的。除了刚才摘录的几个重点的问题，巴菲特也回答了是否会投资海外市场。他表示，虽然现在日本市场非常的引人注目，但是他只对美国比较的熟悉，未来大规模的投资海外市场，例如印度、中国等市场几乎不大可能。还有一个比较有意思的问题，就是有人问特斯拉开发的自动驾驶技术，如果将交通事故的发生率降低了50%，这将影响伯克希尔旗下该扣的汽车保险业务的收入。巴菲特对此是怎样看待的？巴菲特回答说，自动驾驶技术降低了交通事故发生率，虽然会让保险业务的收入减少，但是对整个社会却是有好处的。负责保险业务的副董事长阿吉特·贾恩则补充道，即使自动驾驶技术带来的事故率降低，但是可能每一单的维修成本会飙升，最终对保险业务的影响目前还不确定。这次股东大会的氛围比起以往显得比较严肃，尽管芒格的离去意味着一个时代的结束，尽管巴菲特失去了他最重要的搭档，但是作为伯克希尔这艘大船的掌舵者，巴菲特依旧为公司的文化和战略的传承做了许多的工作，也竭尽全力的维持股东们对这艘大船的前进方向的信心。也许他维持的不仅仅是伯克希尔股东们的信心，更是所有美股投资者的信心。那我们拭目以待，会继续关注伯克希尔的发展。今天的分享就是这样，欢迎点赞转发并订阅我的频道，感谢你的观看与支持，我们下期再见，拜拜。